Hi, it's almost time for our Pedestrian and Bicycle Program and Safe Routes to School Call for Projects webinar to begin. I just want to do a quick check-in to make sure that people can hear. So if you use the question tab on your control panel and type in that you can hear us, that would be great. All right, I'm seeing responses. People can hear. That's super. All right, I'll give just a minute more for a few more people to sign in. We had quite a few people register for the webinar, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's begin. Barb, do you want to start us off with the introduction?
Sure. We'll introduce ourselves quickly with the Active Transportation Division. My name is Barb Chamberlain, and I'm the director. And ask Charlotte and Brian to introduce themselves so you know those voices as well.
This is Charlotte Claybrook, and I'm the Active Transportation Programs Manager.
And this is Brian Wood, and I'm an Active Transportation Program Specialist.
And we are collectively speaking to you from Seattle, Olympia, and Oak Harbor. And like all of you on the call, I'm imagining you are working in a different sort of setting and either putting up with or enjoying the change. If you own a dog, your dog is pretty happy. If you own a cat, your cat may have some questions about how long this is going to go on. We want to thank you for taking the time to be on this webinar, to be interested in applying to these programs. And we know that we're all doing this work under extraordinary and very trying circumstances. So just want you to know we're thinking about how challenging it is for you right now for the work that you do and how challenging it is for the people of Washington. What we see happening in this extraordinary time really tells us how critical walking and biking facilities are, and comfortable, safe, and particularly separated facilities. They're really critical for the safety of our residents as they're moving around now in new ways. And they're also essential for a resilient transportation system. In those places where a lot of folks made use of transit to get places, they may no longer feel comfortable getting onto transit. And transit service is absolutely essential, but in a time like this, one of the things you may be seeing is more people biking for transportation than might otherwise be the case. So it's not the kind of illustration any of us would have wanted, but it definitely is a demonstration that at the end of the day, if every other mode is not working for you or is for some reason not available, we all end up using active transportation. And that makes these grants at this time really important. We know that. We wish we could guarantee you or promise you some specific level of funding. And we do have some assumptions that we build into our work around these grant programs when we go out with the call for projects. We look at what was planned for the upcoming session as an appropriation for each grant program. What we also know, we all know that in Washington, we're in really extraordinary times. We first had the passage of I-976, and that affects the funding mechanism that supports a large portion of these grants. When the governor and legislature had to respond to that, they protected these grants. They kept the currently funded pedestrian and bicycle and safe routes to school grants. They sort of held harmless those grants and continued the work on those really vital projects. We can't predict what will happen in the upcoming session around transportation funding generally and around these grant programs in particular. We know we have some downturns in the revenue sources, but we won't really know the magnitude of those till we're a few months out. And those downturns in gas tax revenues, we know affect local program or local jurisdiction funding and your ability to match, as well as our ability to make the grants. So with all of that uncertainty swirling around and that real need for better walking and biking facilities all the time, regardless of what's happening in the world, we do want to encourage you to apply. These applications are really an indicator of the extent of the need in all of our communities, large and small. We're working right now on the active transportation plan, and that plan is required under state law to serve as the statewide needs assessment. And part of what we incorporate in it directly is those past years of grant applications we were not able to fund. And so we're looking to this round of applications as well to say this is an indicator of the need for more funding for walking and biking facilities, not less. So, stay tuned and we'll all learn what happens as far as specific funding levels. But we do encourage you to consider applying after you've heard the webinar if this all makes sense to you as an appropriate place for you to hope to get some funding. And also stay in touch with us for the active transportation plan itself. We're still working on the document that will go out later this spring for public comment. And if you're not already getting our walk and roll e-news, that's one of the ways to stay in touch and to know that there's an opportunity coming up to comment. And with that, I will hand it off to Charlotte and Brian to give you the specific information. And at any point, you can type questions into the chat box and we'll all keep an eye on those and try to field those questions. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Barb. So I see there's already a question about the availability of the PowerPoint slides and the webinar. We are recording the webinar. We will save that and put it on the Call for Projects webpage. And we will also be saving the webinar slides and put the slides as an Adobe file on that Call for Projects webpage. So I'm going to go through quickly how we're going to be sharing information with you and what's on the agenda for the webinar. I know it's 2 hours, that's a lot of time. So we're going to talk about the program purpose. We're going to talk about review criteria, the program specifics, examples of eligible improvements, and we're going to save time at the end for questions and answers. However, if you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate to type those in. And we will probably pause from time to time to make sure that we're capturing anything that might not need to be addressed sooner than later. The first thing I want to point out to you, you're on this webinar, so you're probably aware of it, but the details about this call for projects, what you need to do, what you need to provide, are available on the web. And I'm just going to make a quick shift and go to the page that I queued up. So you can see some of the key points. I'm now on the online site. I'm going to scroll down through the generic information. And I want to point out that the online call for projects includes the link to SurveyMonkey, where the application materials are located. I'll be talking about a Word sample of all the questions that are included in SurveyMonkey in just a little bit. I'll point out that there's a link to that there as well. That when you submit in SurveyMonkey, you'll also be asked to send an email to the ADT grants webpage and include a copy of a plan sheet. And that would include a cross-section document for projects that are construction infrastructure type projects. For those projects that are not, we still need you to provide the, every project needs to provide a detailed cost estimate. And that would be as attachment to an email to this link site here. I'll repeat that again, so not to worry. I'm going to go back to the slides. There is more information on that page that I encourage you to just check out. And let's go to the next slide. In summary about these programs, they are for eligible improvements on all roads in Washington State. All agencies, including tribal government, are eligible to apply. And projects must comply with the federal and state requirements that we have for our programs. Safe Routes to School has federal funds. The Pedestrian and Bicycle programs has just state funds. The project needs to be included in the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, local TIP. And so be prepared for that if you propose a project. And then lastly, I want to make a point to say match is not required. It's something that we encourage, and we do give extra points or credit towards projects that have match, but it is not a deal killer if you don't have a match available. Brian, did you want to talk through the pedestrian and bicycle program slides here?
Certainly. Okay, so starting with the purpose of the pedestrian and bicycle program, consistent with our state goals for Target Zero, this program has a goal of eliminating motor vehicle involved fatal and serious injury crashes with bicyclists and pedestrians. We also want more and better connected facilities that people feel comfortable using. And we want to see more people biking and walking for all reasons. So there are two types of projects that are eligible. And construction projects should address pedestrian and bicyclist safety and are improvements that help active travelers get to where they need to go, otherwise known as mobility. These projects may include preliminary engineering, so you don't need to have everything dialed in to start using the grant funds. Project development and design-only projects that will result in ready-to-construct pedestrian and bicyclist improvement projects are also eligible. This means that most preliminary engineering will be completed, and these projects may include things like community outreach and even tactical urbanism, which is a way of testing improvements before they are implemented. So now we are looking at just some of the description of the program and how it's funded. And you can see that we are hopeful that we'll be seeing 18.4 million available for the pedestrian and bicycle program. These are state funds, so not using federal dollars if that's a concern on certain projects. The application due date, note that there's a different due date for this program and for the Safe Routes to School program, which you'll see in a minute. July 13th for this program. In 2019, the previous grant round, the lowest funded project was 47,100, and this went all the way up to 2 million. And this varies from year to year, or from grant round to grant round. But this at least gives you some ballpark to think about in terms of the projects that you might be putting together. And this program may include design-only projects in contrast to the one Charlotte will be describing. All right, so here's a history of the pedestrian and bicycle program funding. The funding requests have consistently exceeded funding amounts provided. Between 2005 and 2015, over $125.6 million has been made available for 314 projects. And since 2005, there have been a total of 1,382 project requests, totaling $937 million. 23% of proposed projects have been awarded.
So with the Safe Routes to School program, the purposes are to eliminate traffic crashes involving children who are trying to get to school by walking or biking, to connect the network of facilities for walking and biking to school within the 2-mile road distance of the school, and to increase the number of children who can and do walk or bike safely. There are 2 types of projects eligible under the Safe Routes to School program. The first is very similar to the first under the pedestrian and bicycle program. It involves a construction or infrastructure type project. The major difference here is that these projects would be within 2 miles of a school. It can be any school, kindergarten through 12th grade, and that includes private as well as public schools. second type of project under this program is the education encouragement only type project, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that later. So for the 2021-2023 time biennium, we have about $19.2 million that we're expecting. And this is a mix of both federal and state funds that have been used in the past for this program and that we expect in the future. The application for this program is July the 20th. That's a week past, so it gives you a little bit of time between the two programs to wrap this one up if you're applying for both programs, and you certainly can. The next bullet gives you the range, and these are just examples. This isn't a hard line of where the stop is. You can certainly ask for less money, and you can ask for more funds beyond the $2.464 million. But I would discourage you from asking for more than the total that we have for the whole program. In addition to public agencies, nonprofit entities are also eligible to apply for the education and encouragement component of this program. This is a similar bar chart as the one you saw just a moment ago. This one is specific to requests we've received for the Safe Routes to School program. And you can see it's a similar pattern. We always receive more requests than we have funding to cover the cost for. And so it is a competitive program. You're going to see as I go through the rest of these slides that we've made some changes to the application. And we're trying, again, to make it easier. So there's a lower bar of administrative cost for an agency or an organization to apply, so that it's not as much of a burden. And part of that is because we understand that not all projects will be awarded. The selection process is when we receive the grant applications on the 13th of July for the PED-BIKE program and the 20th of July for Safe Routes to School. There's an internal review with the Active Transportation Division staff. We look through the projects and they'll be tiered based on the core criteria that we have. We then will provide that information to our external review committee, and they do the evaluation. They have access to your application information as well as the data that we support and provide. And the next step after that is those applications that are in the top, typically it's been the top 50% of ranked applications based on the preliminary reviews. We'll get, in the past it's been an on-site project review, but this time around we're looking into an electronic or on-site review depending on the complexities of the project. In December, we send a prioritized list of projects to the governor and to the legislature. And we include every project that is submitted to us ranked in priority order based on the criteria. Projects are selected and award letters sent out in June for a start of projects at the beginning of the 2021 biennium, which starts in July. Now I'm going to spend a little time just talking about the different review criteria that we're looking at. And if you're familiar with the program, and I know from looking at the registration list that many of you are, it's different than we had 2 years ago, the last time we had the call for projects. We put more emphasis on safety in this round, with 40% of our consideration going towards issues that we feel are really closely tied to improving safety conditions for children walking and biking, and for all people who walk and bike in Washington. We're looking for projects that have high quality. We give 18% for that, and I'll explain more about each of these in just a minute. We have 14% going towards value, 12% towards deliverability, and 16% consideration for equity.
Charlotte, can I stop you for a second?
Yes.
We've got a few questions here. And one was, what is the percent of the Ped Bike grants approved that had no match?
That is a good question, and we'll have to get back to you on that one. I don't have that memorized, but I know we have it in our data, and we'll get back to you.
Okay, and we're also hearing that there's some auditory feedback, possibly from one of us that might be not be muted at the same time. Double checking that I am muted, and so that's a mechanical one. And then one more is if a proponent yet would be a strong competitor for Ped Bike, will WSDOT share the application between the two calls? Would we move it over, I guess, is the question. Would we, as SRTS grant, would we ever move it into the Ped Bike category, I believe is the question. Oh, did you miss my last question, Charlotte? Sorry. I think I did just get muted. So if somebody has applied to the Safe Routes to School program, but they're not selected, would they still be considered, or could they be considered for the Ped Bike program?
Thank you for restating the question. I actually had myself on mute. Trying to cut back on that feedback. So the answer to your question is that in the past, where we've seen projects that would make more sense in one program or another, for example, a Ped Bike project that was submitted under the Safe Routes to School program, if you submitted it in time for the cutoff for the Ped Bike program, and we contacted you and you were amenable to making the shift, then we could make the shift. We don't automatically do that. So you do need to think to yourself which is a better fit. And if you have questions about that, you can contact us. Is that it for the questions, Brian?
Yes, there is one person who's hoping to view this later, and we'll have to contact them because it sounds like they had trouble connecting.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go ahead now and talk about the criteria item as it relates to safety. And that is made up of local road safety plan consideration about traffic stress, the level of traffic stress for the project location that you request. It is considering speeding and speed management that you may have included in your project. And we also take a look at crash history. In the SurveyMonkey, you'll see there's a line for you to indicate if you have a local road safety plan and if the project is included in that plan. And so if you don't have a local road safety plan, you may want to consider putting one together. We're using that work as a way to inform us that you have done some work to think about what are the types of crashes that you have in your community and what would work best for you in terms of priorities for addressing that. The local road safety plans were required for the city safety program and the county safety program. So we know that several communities have these. It's not required for our program, but we will be giving obviously some extra credit for those who do. The plan should look at your crash data, get a pretty good understanding of that. Should identify the factors associated with your crashes, look for patterns, find locations where the types of crashes that you find are occurring, and work to identify countermeasures appropriate for those crash factors. And then the plan will typically have a list of projects with the details about their location, the type of treatment, and the crash factors associated with them. Different plans have different levels of detail, and we're not going to be grading your plan, but we do hope that you'll take the time to consider it and process that helps you identify those projects that will help make the best safety improvement for your community. When it comes to level of traffic stress, it's just another way for us to talk about identifying projects at locations where safety issues tend to be more closely tied with the types of facilities, types of road characteristics where crashes have occurred in the past here in Washington State. And that includes roads that have a higher number of travel lanes, higher posted speed, and a higher number of vehicles a day. And so this level of traffic stress system is a way to rank different roads. And the slide that you're seeing now shows that we have 4 levels of ranking. The first is level 1, level of traffic stress 1, which should be comfortable and very low in terms of potential stress for just about any person. That would include an 8-year-old and on up to someone who might be 80 years old. The rankings go all the way up, 2, 3, and 4, 4 being the most stressful of the road characteristics that you would expect. And there might not be a separated facility, there's multiple travel lanes, higher speeds. And we would expect that people using the facility under those conditions don't have any other choice, or they're especially strong and confident type of bicyclists or people who are walking. Also under our speed consideration criteria, we're thinking about speed as it applies to whether you have speeders, people who are exceeding the speed limit in the project location that you choose, or a location where you have a higher speed and it might be indicated that you could work to lower that speed and get to a lower posted speed for the area. And lastly, part of the safety criteria has to do with crash history. It's not necessary to have had a fatal or a serious injury crash at the location where you're proposing a project, but we will be looking at that data, and it will be a part of what's considered when we think about that safety element of the review criteria that is 40% of consideration for the project. If you don't have access to the crash information about your community, you can access that through the Washington State Department of Transportation Data and GIS Modeling Office. And if you go to the link that is available to you on the web page, on the call for projects, you'll see there is a form on that page for you to fill out to ask for the data specific to your community. Now, having said that, you will also probably notice that the application form, the SurveyMonkey application form, does not have a place for you to put that information. We have the information ourselves, and to make it easier for you, we're going to be putting that information into the spreadsheet with the rest of your data. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do, again, to make this easier for you and less time consuming. Our agency recognizes that equity is a very important piece of providing for people in Washington State, and in particular, those populations that may have a heavier reliance on walking and biking for transportation needs. As such, both of our programs prioritize equity as a part of the review criteria. And we're looking for projects that serve a variety of needs. And it could be people of color, people with Hispanic heritage, people with low incomes, or people with disabilities. Again, this is a criteria item that we'll be able to use the census data that we have populated already on one of our web pages. And so you won't be asked to provide that information in your application, but you may want to know what we're going to be looking at when we make those determinations. The agency has an application for local planning and community accessibility web link. It's a portal, and it's fondly called the alpaca page. When you go to this page, you can zoom into any location in the state. It has the local road system and census data loaded into it. So for that location, you can click on minority status, poverty status, disability to get the information for the census block that is adjacent to that project. And that's what we'll be using to identify that for the pedestrian and bicycle program. For Safe Routes to School, we'll be going to the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction webpage. They have a report card, and I'm going to take you to it quickly in case this is something that you want to check out for yourself when you're considering where to do a Safe Routes to School project. When you click on that link, you get a page with these lovely children, and you scroll down just a little, and you'll see a spot that allows you to type in a school or school district name. So I am going to start with this A.J. West Elementary School in the Aberdeen School District, and giving it a moment to think about that. It's going to pull up data specific to that school. Now we're going to be focusing in on the diversity information, so you want to click on that tab. When you do, you have this enrollment information, one about demographics, which gives you the bar chart that you saw in my slide for the other elementary school. And here you can determine the percent of the population of different groups. In order to get low income and the percent of population with disabilities, you click on that second one, the enrollment by student program and characteristics, and it gives you another bar chart. So that's where we'll be going to get that information for the school that you prioritize for your Safe Routes to School project to make our determination regarding your focus on equity for the project. Now I'm going to shift over to project quality, and it generally refers to the potential for the project to address the purpose and need of the program. The details behind that are different depending on the different program you choose and the project type within that program. Now, if you're doing an infrastructure or construction type project where you'll be building a sidewalk or a bicycle facility, then we're looking for the potential for the treatment that you choose to be effective. And we're also going to be looking at the quality of the proposed budget that you put forward. If you're doing a pedestrian and bicycle program development project, project development design only project, Then we'll be looking at things like proposed community engagement events, percent of preliminary engineering that you will complete by the end of project with the funds that are available for the project, the extent to which resulting project will be ready to construct, and we'll also look at the quality of the proposed budget. Under the education and encouragement type project that is within the Safe Routes to School program, this particular element will look at the potential for the number of children that will be reached with the education or encouragement work, and the quality and detail of the proposed project. All right, 2 more to go. Deliverability and other look at a variety of things. This represents 12% of consideration for the program. And so it's made up of the consistency with community plans, committed funding, and past history of a successful project, or I should say a past history of not having difficulty with a past project. In particular, regarding plan collaboration, we're looking to see that you have your project as a part of a regional or a local transportation plan. If it is incorporated into a human service transportation plan or a transit agency plan, if that applies to your community. We'll look at local regional resiliency plans. This time of our history has brought that to our attention as being very important to consider as a piece of this. We're also looking to see if the lead agency for the project has an ADA transition plan, or if the size of your community doesn't require that you are in compliance with ADA planning, that you have a complete streets ordinance, greenhouse gas emissions policy, and or a bicycle-friendly community ranking. In the call for projects on our webpage, there are links that can help you with more information about any one of these particular items. The last item here on deliverability has to do with match. And again, it's not required, but this is where it comes into play that some of our review criteria will consider match. Now, the last piece under deliverability is if you have had a past pedestrian and bicycle project or a Safe Routes to School project within the last biennium, we'll look back to see if you've had delays or a need for a major scope change. And if those types of things are going on, we recognize that you might need a little bit more time before you get another project. And so that's why this is one of the things that we consider under deliverability.
Charlotte, can I start real quickly and give you questions? All right.
Yeah.
So first I want to capture one that I can't see anymore from looks like from Liz. She had asked about the, actually, let me come back to that question because I'm missing it. I answered it and it eliminated her question.
Right.
So there's a, let me scroll back up here. Sorry about this. So the language of our application says adopted city or county safety plan, but apparently that is not, being adopted by the city council was not a requirement. How are we going to treat adopted in terms of safety plans?
That is a great question. We'll have to get back to you on that. And it is something that will, I think, be reflected in most applicants' minds. So it's something that will change online in the call for projects. We'll explain that particular nuance, whether it has to be an adopted safety plan or not. My apologies for not having a straight up answer on that. I'm not as familiar with the nuances behind those safety plans, but I do appreciate your question.
Okay, there's another one here about the fact that since we're in this COVID-19 situation and traffic volumes have decreased and there's an inaccuracy in counts, what determination or what considerations will be given to determine speeds if no counts exist currently?
I guess the person asking this question is making an assumption that there would be no traffic. It would be certainly a change traffic, and that does make sense. If it is such that your traffic patterns are significantly different during the time when you'll be taking this, getting the information for the application, then I would encourage you to use old data if you have the old data. And if you don't and it continues to be a problem, then we'll discuss that and we will post information specific to that on the call for projects. I understand that traffic volumes and the trip to school, the way it has been in the past, will not happen again for those locations that are safe routes to school projects between now and when the applications are due. So we'll need to brainstorm how we work around that for those situations where you won't be able to get that information.
I'm recalling Liz's prior question, which was regarding the application, and you might want to treat this later when we get into the application, but it was the current way we are running this application does not provide a large narrative section where you can explain why certain treatments are being used or historical data or information that might seem relevant. So again, we might want to talk about that one later once we get to the application itself, but I just recalled what the question was. And then there's another question here. What years of crash data will we be looking at to assess the safety impacts of our projects?
We'll be looking at crash data 2014 to 2018. That's a 5-year span.
Okay. And for public engagement, there's a concern about the fact that we may not be allowed to have large gatherings and how that would influence public engagement.
True. That is potentially an issue. However, there is work being done now, I know, for electronic engagement and expanding that. So we're going to expect some level of public engagement and community outreach regarding these projects and work going forward for transportation improvements, even with the difficulties we have under COVID-19 for large groups coming together. We'll have to find a way forward with that.
Okay. And there's a question about a concern that many communities will not have match funds available due to the I-976 and COVID-19 situation, and a desire to have more information on how much consideration will be given to match in a given application.
The thing about the match and all of the other review criteria that we're using is that these programs are competitive, which means we're looking at all the applications that are submitted to us and comparing them against each other. It's a bell curve that we're looking at. And the expectation is that the match situation is going to be difficult in much the same way for many applicants. And that'll reflect itself in the pool that we receive and compare to. So that's one part of the answer to your question about match consideration. The second piece to that is that it is within the deliverabilities category. The total consideration under deliverabilities is 12%. That's 12% out of 100. And you'll notice that there are many other items under deliverability that we're looking at. So you can be rest assured that it is not a make or break deal if you do not have a match.
All right, and many communities have discovered that crash history data is incomplete for local roads or contains errors that have not been updated because the local agency utilizes their own database. There should be an option to send crash history as an attachment.
So I would ask local agencies who feel like they have better crash data than what is available on the DOT data inventory to send either a message to myself or to you, Brian, with specific details about that. And that is the kind of information that we would pass on to our data office so that they can update their file.
Liz reposted her question. I'll read it for you here, but again, we could take care of it during that next section. Saying that I was surprised to see that there was no space to include a narrative in the application, including basic descriptions, example, how the project links to transit, planned education, encouragement elements, etc. And could you please speak more about this? And again, I think we should probably wait on that until the application itself. And can match be cash in kind? Is there a specific percent suggested? I think you've already dealt with part of that, the percent, but whether it can be cash or in kind.
It can be either cash or in kind.
Again, there was a question about the copy of the presentation. We will have a copy of both the webinar itself, as well as you would be able to just have this presentation with whatever notes that we put into it. Some of the scope elements, such as a public outreach, are considered planning at time of obligation. Can these be included with actual preliminary engineering to develop the contract documents in a design-only grant application? I'm not sure if this is asking, I know we can't fund work that's already been done, if that is what this question is.
Perhaps the person asking the question can clarify that, and we can respond to it when we come back to another spot where we're answering questions.
Sounds good. And we need to complete a community public comment period before applying.
One of the reasons we're encouraging the use of providing information about whether your project is already in a plan or not is that we recognize that projects that find themselves into local or regional plans tend to have already been vetted in some way with community outreach. So one way or another, we hope that the projects you put forward will have had some community engagement and outreach associated with it, or that you are going to include that as a part of your project.
For the equity criteria, as it relates to safe routes to school, will WSDOT be using OSPI data only or also the census data?
We will be using OSPI data only.
And do we get points for creative public engagement?
Yes, you do.
And I don't see a question in the application to provide data on pedestrian bike volumes and demographics. Is that not needed?
That's right. There isn't a question to provide information about volumes or demographics. We are not going to be using the volumes issue. We're going to be looking at the census data for demographics issues. And we'll also be looking at data regarding the density of the population at the location where you are proposing a project, as opposed to the actual counts of people who are out walking or biking.
So what you're saying is that we're looking at potential demand rather than actual counts.
That's right.
Yeah. And will you consider previous expenditures on the project as local match?
We can only consider match for the time period when the project starts and ends.
And last one here, does this program weigh differently for rural communities and school districts that would like to improve walk zone and or bicycle accessibility that probably do not have safety plans and or matching assistance as opposed to suburban or urban localities?
In the past, the programs have prioritized a mix of projects that have included both rural and urban locations. I expect that to continue, in the way that we define the area that we're looking at when we consider a project should help to continue that forward into this biennium.
Yeah. And we could add that we were told by Matthew Enders in the safety program that he would be very much willing to work with communities who do wish to get a safety plan in place. It may be a lot less arduous than you think it is. And
okay,
yeah, we're going to have to probably get going. This is the last one here. Can the cost of upgrading curb ramps and repaving be considered as local match? It's the same. I think you just answered that. All right.
Okay. So another item for consideration in terms of prioritizing projects is value. And we're looking at value as it relates to population density and destination density, and project linkages to transit, bus stops, ferry terminals, train stations, linkages to other modes. And so again, this is something that we have in our data set, information about the population density, destination density, and modal connections. And the data that we'll be using to identify that for your project would be dependent on the project location that you choose. So there is not a question in the application itself for you to provide this information to us, as we mentioned before in one of the previous questions that were asked. Now, I'm going to shift again and take us to the SurveyMonkey page itself. Just to walk you through what that looks like and some of the skip patterns associated with it. When you click the link in the call for projects, you'll see you come to this page, and the first set of questions includes some basic information about the lead agency that is involved, contact information, phone numbers, etc. And as you see, I've been in here before. The items with a star associated with them are required answer questions. That's why I'm putting this information in here so we can continue moving to the next page. There's a question that asks for the title of your project, and these titles will stay with the project throughout their lifetime. If they're funded, they will continue through to construction. So we wanted to spend just a little time making sure that when you provide information about a title, you include information about the street name. If it's Safe Routes to School project, the name of the school. And we want you to include the name of the funding program that you have as well. The response should be no more than 255 characters. That's all we're able to use for a project that's awarded. But we do want you to get some good information into that regarding the title so we understand clearly which your project is. How much funding is being requested? This third question was very important. This is specific to your project, and it's not the total cost. That's question 5, and there's a space there in number 4 for your match. So if you put your request and then your match amount, and if your match amount is 0, that's fine. So let's go ahead and go with 0. And the total cost of your project should equal the 2. Oops, I forgot. This is a good thing. You should not put commas, and you should not put any symbols like $sign. It's whole numbers only. All right, question number 6, a little bit complicated, so I'm going to talk about it a bit. We're looking at we're looking for the latitude and the longitude of your project location. And this is very important to us because a lot of the data that we have that's going to be connected to your project, your crash data, the crash data we have, the census data that we have, the demographics, all that will be tied to where your project is because we'll be using GIS to identify that information. The beginning latitude and longitude should have numbers similar to these. Or if you have a project with multiple location sites, that's fine too. You'll want to identify for yourself that one site is project A or location A, the next is location B, etc., etc. And you could put that information directly into these places, providing longitude and latitude for each location. The first line is just for the beginning start point. The second is the end point. And if you have a project like your project development or design only project, that would be a not applicable. So you would be putting that here, not applicable. Then for projects that are at a road location, we're asking for posted speed and operating speed. And posted speed should be relatively easy. I understand that operating speed may be difficult, but do your best in getting that information for us because it is a part of how we're going to weight your project against others. There is an option here for you to put a 0 if you have a project that is not associated with a road where there is a speed limit. For example, if you have a trail, if your project is trail related. Question 8 is asking for a vehicle volume, and this is your annual average daily traffic. We don't expect you to have an exact number. We just want to get a range so we have a better understanding of the total number of cars that are going to be out there during a day. And so if you could provide that information, again, there's a not applicable option for you. I have to put something, so I'm adding some answers here, even if they don't make sense. Then question 9 is the number of motor vehicle lanes. Most projects in the past have been for roads where there are 2 or 3 travel lanes, and sometimes there are larger roads that come in for projects as well. So you have those options there. The last question on this page is to determine which particular funding program and type of project you're interested in. If you choose the first infrastructure project under the Pedestrian and Bicycle program or the Safe Routes to School program, you'll be directed to one page, and it has a series of treatment types and characters. If you choose the design only, you'll be sent to a different page that has similarly treatment and improvement types, but you don't get the both, so you got to go with one or the other. If you choose Safe Routes to School, then you need to put in the name of the school. All right, let's see if I got this right. Yes, it allowed me to go to the next page. So here on the next page, this is where the proposed improvements and treatments are listed. Brian's going to go through these in a little more detail in a few moments, but I want to show you how this shows up in the application form. The first question 11 here is pretty straightforward, and it helps us better understand the type of project you have, whether it's going to be a linear, corridor, or segment project. If it's a spot location, typically these are crossing locations, or if it's a mix of both, and any one of these is fine. If you have a Safe Routes to School education and encouragement project, then you would be saying not applicable here because you don't have that particular type of project. Okay, so these questions, questions 12 through 19, start off by identifying a category that we came up with for different types of treatments. You can leave these questions blank if you're not doing any of this particular type of treatment. For example, if you are not doing a crossing treatment, you just scroll down and go to the next question, which is the speed management question. Now, I'm going to give an example here under speed management, again, because these responses are only for whole numbers with no symbols attached. So you'll see that the first potential treatment or improvement under speed management is lane width reduction, length of feet. So you'll just be putting in the number of feet, no commas, and no symbols. And that's all you need right there. The next category are ADA improvements. Then there's a category for bicycle linear treatments. There's a category for pedestrian linear treatments, where the sidewalk is. There's a category for traffic signal treatments. And all of these are tied very specifically to getting responses that are whole numbers. If you have a treatment where you need to provide more information or that isn't listed above, question number 19 is your place to put information about that treatment. So this helps to answer Liz's question. But we only have 50 characters currently for you to answer that question, so we want you to be pithy and brief with your response. If you need more, please give us an email, give us a shout, and let us know. But for now, we're going to try and work with this at 50 characters. And this is if you have a treatment, and Brian will share with you examples of this kind of treatment that is not listed in all these categories lists with the question numbers above it. Very quickly, we have a question here for your scheduled timing, and everyone will need to provide this information. If there's an element here that you're not going to be including with your project, for example, if you're not doing education or encouragement, don't put a date for that. You can put not applicable or leave it blank. Otherwise, you'll need to leave it blank. Otherwise, you need to put in the month and the year associated with it if it is included in the project that you're proposing. This is the area of the application where you indicate whether your project is in another plan, and so on and so forth, to the end where we have the last question where we need you to check to make sure that you have sent us an application budget and or, if needed, the plan sheet and cross section. You need to at least click one of these in order to end your survey. Okay, I'm now going to go back to our presentation, and here's the example of project title and what that might look like. As I mentioned before, street name, the name of the program, and the project. As in the past, there are still inappropriate uses of the funding. These are specific funds associated with safety improvements for people who walk and bike. So some of the limitations are that we cannot include recurring costs. So this is salary, for example, for a crossing guard would not be something that would be an eligible expense. Pavement resurfacing and preservation projects. Other motor vehicle improvements that might reduce the safety for people walking and biking, such as installation of a turn lane that might widen a crossing and make it more complicated or increase exposure. It's not to include improvements for bus stops or school bus programs. If you are providing enforcement in type of treatments, it should not be portable, and these funds are not to be used for gifts, stipends, prizes for participants. That would be an inappropriate use of funds, or for food or beverages. This slide presents an image of several of the resource documents that have guidelines and standards that you should be looking to for particular project types if you need more detail regarding those. Oh dear, my apologies, I clicked in the wrong spot. This is an example of a cost estimate, and we want the details here. If you just itemize out all the different components of what would be included in the project, put the unit price and the total expense, the unit that is being used for measure. And this is particularly important if you have an education or an encouragement type project, that you put the specific information that you're asking for reimbursement for here in the cost estimate. You wouldn't have these other categories, obviously, but you would have your own. Now, this is an example of the cross section, and that there's a link to this in the online call for projects, and this is an example of the plan view to give you an idea of the kind of information we're looking for construction and infrastructure type projects. And then lastly, if you're doing a project that where the project limits overlap into another agency's jurisdiction, and in particular for a state route, you will need to have a concurrence letter. This should not be a letter of support, it's a concurrence letter that should make it clear that the other jurisdiction understands the project and concurs with it. In each of these slides, I've provided the link to the email address that you'll need to send the attachments to. And from here, I'm going to switch over and hand the screen over to.
And before you do, or while you're doing that, we could field a few more questions.
Okay.
So would the Ped Bike and Safety Program consider system-wide improvements, such as adding raised profile edge lines throughout several arterials? Example, projects not specific to any one road or corridor.
Yes, but you will need to identify the locations for each one.
Okay. If the project is constructing a bike and pedestrian bridge over a state route, would we use 0 for speed or the posted speed of the state route?
This would be a bridge on a multi-use trail, and in that case, yes, that would be the number that you would use.
If a project is eligible for both programs, should the proponent apply to both? In other words, fill out 2 applications.
No, we ask that you choose one or the other program for your project.
Okay. Oh, and one I missed here. Will a consultant assisting with multiple applications experience issues submitting more than one application?
Currently, that limitation has been turned off. You should be able to submit as many applications from one site as you need to.
Okay. Are there options for other items that aren't on your list? I believe you mentioned those were available in the application.
Yes, there certainly are. And Brian, I think you're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes.
Yes. Can the SurveyMonkey application be saved as you go along until submission? And I mean, I think you can just leave it open on your screen as you continue working on it, but I don't know that there's a save until that submission is hit. And that does also bring up the issue of we provide a Word version that you can use for your records. Some people want an even more immediate record and want to print screens, and that's fine to do so as well, but there is no printout of the SurveyMonkey that we can get for you. It just isn't something that that they provide.
Yes, I strongly encourage you as an applicant to use the Word version of the application to prepare your answers for SurveyMonkey. And when you have answered all the questions in the Word version, then go in and do the SurveyMonkey all at once.
Yeah. How does the SurveyMonkey treatment section work with a design-only project?
With a design-only project, you will be channeled into a different page that lists treatments associated with a design-only type project. So you'll be able to choose if you're going to be doing preliminary right-of-way, if you are planning to do a temporary pop-up installation project, or other community engagement related work, etc., etc.
Yes, and we have a slide that shows that as well. And maybe we can speak, there was a request to speak to pop-up temporary installations more, and maybe we can do that in that next section. And one more here, school bus stop ineligibility relates to school programs only. Public transit stops are eligible as a public right-of-way mode. Linkage, oh, it's a question. So if we're doing something for public transit, is it eligible under this? If we're doing something like, I'm assuming this is talking maybe about last mile to transit, which would be eligible.
That's right. So the pedestrian and bicycle connections to those transit stops are definitely eligible. What might not be is a transit shelter or other amenities like a garbage can or a bench associated with a transit stop. We're really looking for making those improvements for people walking and biking to get to whatever connection they need to make.
Okay. And Let's see, you might be hearing my Alexa in the background for some reason. She just started speaking. So does the SurveyMonkey application allow the document to be saved? I think we already talked about it, it doesn't. Is there a confirmation email? I don't believe that SurveyMonkey gave me a confirmation email, is that right?
That's right. You will get a confirmation email when you send your attachment.
Okay, that helps. Is there a limit of the number of applications that can be submitted?
No limit.
Okay, oh, I better go back up, I missed some. If we're proposing bike lanes as part of the project, does this trigger curb ramps requirements from WSDOT, or should we follow our local policies?
If you're building the bike lane in your jurisdiction and you have road standards specific to that, you need to follow those. We encourage you to use the standards from the guide that we recommend as reference tools. If you're making this improvement on a state route, then you do need to follow the requirements for DOT.
And would a roundabout on a state route with pedestrian crossing be eligible?
Yes, it would.
All right. And what is the reason for using SurveyMonkeys for the applications if we are already filling out the Word document and the applicants are doing work twice?
Good point. We've moved to SurveyMonkey to eliminate administrative burden for both our applicants and for us. And that is why you need to do the SurveyMonkey part of it. So that is an unfortunate part of this. If you choose to not use the Word version and just do it once in SurveyMonkey, that's acceptable. But we need you to put it in SurveyMonkey.
It actually increases the accuracy of us seeing all of the details because SurveyMonkey will put them into a spreadsheet form for us. So otherwise you can miss it when it's hidden inside a narrative somewhere. It can be, if one reviewer doesn't miss it, another one does, and you don't know how it got rated after that. And I wasn't quite clear on the answer regarding the speed limit for a shared use path, including a bridge over a highway. If a new shared use bike path is proposed that diverts pedestrian bike traffic from an existing road, do we use that road's data for the grant application questions? This includes speed, 80 lanes.
Thank you for clarifying your question. That is so much more straightforward. And the answer is yes. If your new shared use path will divert the bicyclist or pedestrian off of a higher speed road to allow them to reach their destination without mixing with traffic, then you should use the speed limit information, the traffic volume information, and the number of travel lane information specific to that road that you're moving people off of.
And this is a clarification on that roundabout question. Is it eligible for both programs or just one?
It would be eligible for either program.
Okay. And if our PC crashes in the middle of filling out the SurveyMonkey application, will we lose that page's information or the entire application? My guess is you lose anything in SurveyMonkey if you, yeah, I think you lose the link, right, until you hit submit.
SurveyMonkey implied when I was preparing these materials that you would be able to go back in and finish your application. I don't have that experience as a user of SurveyMonkey, so I cannot tell you with definity, but we'll run a test we'll confirm, and we'll update our online call for projects webpage to make sure that we're clear about that information going forward.
Okay. All right. And we're almost done. Well, last one. What if we submit the SurveyMonkey application and then realize that we made a mistake? If that happens, how do we correct it?
If you've already submitted the application, you can't correct it in SurveyMonkey. You could send us an email, and if it's within our timeline and we have the ability to do it, we might update that for you in the spreadsheet, but there's no guarantee. Basically, if you make a mistake, it's a mistake that stays with the application.
And what years are the funds for? When the example, when are funds program available to spend and need to be used by?
The funds are identified for the 2021-23 biennium. We do not have a timeline for when you have to finish your project. However, we do have a requirement that you be able to start your project within that first year of the biennium. If you have a project where you will not be able to start in that time period, it would probably be better for you to wait for a future grant application process.
Okay, and are projects required to be on the state tip? And I think that's only if they are receiving federal funds and or they are regionally significant projects.
We manage the inclusion of these two programs on the STIP internally. So you would not need to worry about that. Do make sure that it gets into your local or regional TIP.
And by the first year, do you mean 2021 or July 2021 through June 2022?
I believe the preference is that you begin the project by the within the 2021 year.
So calendar year finishing, you know, with, or do you mean July 2021 and you have a full year until June 2022? Or
I'm talking about the calendar year.
okay. All right. Now we can move on to the next piece. Are you seeing my slide, Charlotte?
I am.
All right. I am going to hide the comment box because I won't be able to do both at once. So a wide range of treatments exist today for improving both pedestrian and bicyclist safety and user experience. The many options offer the opportunity to get the right solution for a variety of contexts, but also the challenge of finding that solution. Design-only projects can be the right choice when the path forward isn't obvious and exploration needs to be part of the process. Education and encouragement projects are a little different in that we are improving our users rather than just the facilities they operate on. These next slides will highlight some of the treatment options you might consider, and then we will wind up with a few extra thoughts about the design-only and education encouragement projects. Note that there is an element of art and science to making improvements for people who walk and bike. The perfect treatment may not be acceptable to your community, and you need to work with the users as well as consider design elements. So here we're looking at median refuge islands, which make it easier and safer for bicyclists and pedestrians to cross. Users only need to monitor one direction of traffic, which is especially helpful for older users who have more difficulty judging gaps. For less mobile users, breaking the crossing distance up into more manageable chunks can be helpful. Median features also calm traffic. Protected intersections are a pretty new concept in the United States, going from 0 in 2015 to now 12 by 2017, and there may be more since then. They essentially extend protected bike lanes through the intersection, while at the same time offering the benefits of curb extensions to pedestrians. Drivers can't make higher speed turns, and they're better able to see bicyclists and pedestrians who are trying to cross as the drivers make the turns. The publication Don't Give Up at the Intersection, released in 2019, is an expansion of NACTO's Urban Bikeway Design Guide. So that design guide is referenced in our call for projects, but they have expanded that to include the intersections. Raised crossings, like speed humps, reinforce lower speeds, so they are traffic calming measures. They are also important crossing tools for other reasons. They elevate pedestrians, making them more visible, and they improve accessibility by maintaining the pedestrian grade. They are often used at mid-block crossings, and the treatment may include a variety of other crossing enhancement features, such as median protection islands or pedestrian scale lighting, for instance. Signage and pavement markings may seem like low-tech solutions, but they can be part of a suite of improvements. On their own, prominent zebra stripes and high visibility signage serve to make crossings more conspicuous to drivers, and also reinforce the pedestrian's right to cross at that location. Like the previous slide, the right signage and the right positioning can be lower cost solutions that capture a driver's attention. For unsignalized intersections or mid-block crossings, active warning beacons have been shown to significantly increase driver yielding behavior. They don't require signal warrants. And on the left, the treatment is seen with a median protection island, so they can be part of a suite of different treatments. Green paint associated with a bikeway promotes the multi-use nature of a corridor, makes bicyclists more conspicuous, and discourages parking in bike lanes. For intersections, a primary purpose is to raise awareness of a potential conflict for all users. Motorists tend to yield more, and bicyclists are more likely to stay in the dedicated space. It can be helpful for wide, complex intersections and across driveways. Curb extensions, bulb outs, or neck downs can be used where an on-street parking lane exists. Visually and physically narrowing the roadway are one of the things they do for you. They improve the ability of pedestrians and motorists to see each other. Pedestrian promotion, sometimes that's called. Safer and shorter crossings are possible. It tends to lower vehicle turning speeds and prevents parked vehicles from blocking the sight lines, or actually even blocking emergency vehicles that are trying to get around. And it increases space for street furniture. Speed management improvements help reduce speed violations and support efforts to lower posted speeds where there is a desire to do so. But the roadway has been built for higher speeds. So if your goal was to have a lower posted speed, speed management helps you actually achieve that speed rather than just posting it. Several treatments mentioned here already serve to calm traffic and support a desired speed. Here, the Your Speed signs can be effective reminders when used sparingly, and photo enforcement is proving to be one of the most effective deterrents that we have in the toolbox to speeding. Photo enforcement is restricted to school zones and the signalized intersection of two arterials and also rail crossings. Restriping a roadway or a road diet can improve conditions for bicyclists, make it easier for pedestrians crossing the road, and even reduce conflicts between motorists. The reconfiguration itself can have a traffic calming effect, but associated changes such as narrowed lanes or pedestrian crossing protection islands also help with speed management. 4-lane roads carrying up to 20,000 vehicle trips per day are often candidates according to the Federal Highway Administration. As this graphic shows, wider lanes promote higher travel speeds. The perceived level of risk decreases when the lanes are wider for that driver. Of course, when a collision occurs, everything is worse for everybody involved. Sometimes speeds are lowered based on community desire or a recognized need to reduce crashes and conflicts. Such new speeds need to be supported by roadway characteristics, and a first step can be to narrow the travel lanes. School zone flashing beacons help reinforce the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit when kids are going to or returning from school, where it is adjacent to a school property with school-related activity, and where there is a school crossing within 1 mile. The school speed zone begins up to 300 feet before a school property and ends up to 300 feet after. Reducing a turn radius can have a number of benefits for people who walk and bike and makes intersections safer for everyone. The benefits are similar to those of curb extensions. The treatment slows right-turning vehicles, improves pedestrian crossings by reducing crossing distances, and improves visibility between drivers and pedestrians. While large trucks may need to make adjustments during a turn, if they are not the primary user of the intersection, the occasional traffic disruption such trucks cause is generally acceptable. Speed cushions are either speed humps on the top left or speed tables, top right. Speed tables can be integrated with crossings, like the raised crossing we saw earlier. A special case of raised crossing is the raised intersection, which calms traffic, increases pedestrian and bicyclist conspicuity, and can have a significant role in placemaking as it becomes more of a plaza. Bollards are needed because the grade separation between driving lanes and sidewalks disappears with the raised intersection. Chicanes are offset curb extensions that lower traffic speed and can serve to increase available public space. Compact roundabouts are sort of like chicanes for intersections. In addition to the physical influence, these features send a strong message that a lower speed is desired along these corridors. The standard bike lane has been with us since the 70s. It provides separated operating space for those on bicycles, which can increase comfort. It also helps bicyclist and motorist behavior to be more predictable. Bicyclists are not required to use bike lanes. And the image on the left here is illustrating a potential hazard with bike lanes that do not account for door space in parking lanes. Buffered bike lanes, referred to in the DOT's design manual as separated buffered bike lanes, are a step up in providing separation from motor vehicle traffic for bicyclists. The buffer discourages closer approaches by either the bicyclist or the driver. Protected bike lanes are one of the safest linear bicycle facilities because they offer separation and a physical barrier between motor vehicle traffic and bicyclists. Washington State's Department of Transportation Design Manual refers to these facilities as raised and curb separated. So they may be less obvious to you because it's a bit of a different terminology. Others call these cycle tracks, tends to be more European. These can be one-way or two-way features and may be parking protected or use some other barrier. In addition to safety, they appeal to more types of riders. When these are paired with a protected intersection described earlier, they can form a backbone of a cycling network that helps riders of all types get through more challenging areas. Bicycle boulevards are streets with low motorized traffic volumes and speeds that prioritize bicycle travel. They can use a suite of low-cost treatments to discourage through motor vehicle traffic and make it more convenient for bicycle travel. The top left image creates a one-way traffic flow for drivers. The bottom left image uses a median crossing island so bicycles can work with one traffic direction at a time. The image at right shows a sharrow. In this case, the sharrow is being used to tell bicyclists which way the bike boulevard goes. Sharrows have been used to indicate shared lanes, but this is becoming less common as recent studies indicate they may not increase safety and might actually take you in the other direction. They can be effective wayfinding tools, however, and have been employed that way. I believe I've seen some in Seattle, definitely seen it in Portland. Other elements that you might see would be bike boxes could be associated with these, and speed bumps or speed humps could be in their speed tables. Ways to just discourage people from using that just as a through lane for drivers. Wayfinding is an important part of developing an efficient and safe bicycle network. Helping riders find the safest routes and prepare for turns can reduce the potential for conflict that might occur if the drivers end up on busier roadways. Decision signage can be reassuring and may also help tired riders choose a direction that leads to services or a rest point sooner. Like bicyclists, pedestrians are generally safer when there is more separation from motor vehicle traffic. Sidewalks provide great separation. When bike lanes, parking lanes, and/or planted buffer zones exist, pedestrians have even more separation, and they may actually choose to walk more in such locations. Projects might include installation of new sidewalks, closing sidewalk gaps, adding planter strips and other separations, and dealing with driveway treatments, adding curbs, gutters, and curb ramps. Given that sidewalks are the primary pedestrian linear treatment, it is important to consider if they're doing their job well. When the pedestrian path goes up and down with many driveways, travel can be challenging for many pedestrians, such as those in wheelchairs or using walking aids. When there's not room for a full driveway apron, some alternative driveway designs can still comfortably maintain at least a 48-inch level pedestrian pathway across the driveway. This will avoid cross-slope problems for wheelchair users. Much attention is given to ADA ramps because they are required features that need to be upgraded when other road work is done. It is important to remember that curb ramps are not isolated features. They are both part of intersections and linear pedestrian facilities. One of the most important improvements we can make are those that promote connectivity. Curb ramp projects that connect to sidewalks that connect to destinations are much stronger projects. The curb ramp on bottom right provides no benefit to pedestrians. It might be there for the dogs. It's kind of hard to figure out why the point of that curb ramp. Bicycle signal detection improves both efficiency and safety for bicyclists. When a bicyclist is not detected, they may go through a red light, or they may move out of the lane to reach a pedestrian signal button, which takes their attention away from traffic, potentially putting them at greater risk. Signal detection makes bicyclists feel welcome, so it may increase bicycle use. One safety feature is that bicycle detection can be linked to longer green phases, so bicyclists have more time to clear an intersection. In Portland, Oregon, a confirmation light is being tested that reassures bicyclists where signal phases are long that they've actually been detected. Kind of an interesting application, and one that I guess would go in the other category, which we'll talk about in a minute. Leading pedestrian intervals typically give pedestrians a 3 to 7 second head start and have been shown to reduce collisions by as much as 60%. It is especially helpful where turning vehicle volumes are high. Leading bicycle intervals can also be used to help clear bicyclists from the intersection before traffic starts. A bike box provides designated space for bicyclists to wait at intersections. This makes the bicyclist more visible to drivers and helps manage larger numbers of riders who arrive at an intersection. It will also help a bicyclist position themselves for a left turn. Because the riders are in front, the likelihood of a right hook crash is reduced, and the treatment also includes a no right turn on red signage, so that should eliminate that problem. Since the treatment creates an advanced stop bar for drivers, it also reduces encroachment into crosswalks, so pedestrians also benefit from this treatment. High-intensity activated crosswalks, or HOT signals, can improve pedestrian and bicyclist crossings of major streets, where side street volumes do not warrant full traffic signals, or at mid-block locations. Hybrid beacons are dark when not in use. When used, they start with yellow warning lights, and then they change to red that requires drivers to stop. This treatment has greater than 95% compliance with the red phase. Two-stage turn boxes allow left-turning bicyclists in bike lanes to avoid entering motor vehicle travel lanes to complete their turn. They are more often used at signalized intersections and multi-lane roadways, or to get across streetcar tracks. If you've ever had to get across those, they can be scary if you're parallel to them. Instead, they wait in a box and proceed with the next signal phase, or if unsignalized, when it is safe to do so. The treatment reduces turning conflicts and conflicts where bicyclists might end up queuing in the bike lanes or crosswalks while they're waiting to turn. It may also help increase rider comfort with left turns, though it should be noted that they do increase the delay for the rider. Roundabouts offer numerous benefits for driver safety and mobility. It is less clear how they benefit pedestrians and bicyclists. Single-lane roundabouts, where drivers do not have to make decisions, may be very safe options for people who walk and bike. Multi-lane roundabouts create more pedestrian threats, are challenging for visually impaired pedestrians, and more complex for bicyclists. Overall, safety may still be better than signalized intersections. An advantage for pedestrians is that they only have to navigate one direction of vehicle travel at a time. Bicyclists can share this advantage if they operate as pedestrians while they're in that roundabout. So in other words, get out of the roundabout and use it like a pedestrian. And ramps should be provided to help them exit the lane when desired. Separated multi-use trails all but remove the concern for motor vehicles colliding with people who walk and bike. Intersections are a very different matter and have to be considered carefully if users will be very young or have physical or cognitive limitations as they approach that intersection from a relatively safe multi-use path. Multi-use trails can create conflicts between pedestrians and bicyclists, though, so recognizing how the facility will ultimately be used is important. If the path will have a significant number of bicycle commuters while also being used for recreational walking and by children, the design should look at options to manage all the different uses. Speed limit signs alone may not be effective in such cases. Note, to be competitive, consider in terms of a trail project, consider that trails should connect to destinations on both ends, such as transit, schools, housing, services, rather than maybe being set up for something in the future. So they just kind of end and people have an idea that sometime long in the future we'll connect it to something else. Pedestrians may assume that their ability to see oncoming headlights means that motorists can see them at night. However, without sufficient lighting, motorists may not be able to see pedestrians in time to stop. The quality and placement of lighting can enhance an environment and increase comfort and safety. Research has shown that placement of lighting on opposite sides of the street and offset from the crosswalk better illuminates pedestrians for driver detection. Shared streets can be residential or commercial. They might be considered where pedestrian volumes are low, pedestrian volumes are high, but the vehicle volumes are low, or where they could be made lower. They allow very low speed vehicle access and use speed management infrastructure such as staggered parking chicanes to reinforce the speed. They may have street furniture, including bollards, benches, planters, street lights, sculptures, trees, and bicycle parking that emphasize their role as shared spaces. So our SurveyMonkey application didn't list every possible improvement, but we have a box in the survey where you can write them in. This slide shows two such improvements. Bike racks and bike lockers are tools that can increase interest in bicycling and organize bicycles in the streetscape. People who consider riding a bicycle to reach transit may be concerned about bike security and so avoid a more sustainable commute option. And so these give them those secure lockup options. Secure bicycle parking can be enhanced even further by considering its location, putting them where they can be seen. Here are two more treatments that might be written into the other treatments box in the application. Since COVID-19, interest in passive actuation of pedestrian signals has increased. Uncommon treatments that are out there may have a strong research backing, but they have not become mainstream for a variety of reasons. Our grant program will evaluate any proposed treatment for both safety and mobility and the ability to get people walking and riding. Treatments specifically designed to improve the safety and mobility of bicyclists and pedestrians that are identified in other peer-reviewed guidance from nationally recognized engineering studies, such as the NCHRP, or adopted standards will be considered. Proposed improvements must be included in the most current version of the manual on uniform traffic control devices and have interim approval or be accepted under experimental status. That might apply to that little blue light that tells you you've been seen by your traffic signal, which is already in play in Portland. So it possibly does have interim approval. Development and design only projects are offered where a pedestrian and bicycle, where we've already identified needs for pedestrians and bicyclists. But the path forward for addressing those needs has not been identified. These are not intended for small scale projects, such as installing lighting at an existing crossing. Small projects may also need funds for design, but those preliminary engineering costs should be included in the construction project budget. This slide lists a number of project elements that might be included in a development design only project application. Note, if you check any of these elements off in the online application, be sure they are included in your detailed budget. These projects may need to gather information, such as numbers of walkers and bicyclists, and they may involve quite a bit of public engagement. There may be need to investigate the overall walking and bicycling network as it relates to the project, so it can ultimately contribute to low traffic stress connectivity for the community. These projects often do preliminary right-of-way and environmental investigations before moving forward with design work. In some cases, interim treatments may be used to investigate effectiveness and community acceptance. So pop-ups have been mentioned and could be mentioned here again. You could consider pop-ups part of community engagement. Or that tactical urbanism is another example of kind of a low-key pop-up. But they are great community engagement tools to find out if it actually works for your community. Just because it worked well in another one, it may not be accepted or have undesired effects in your community. All right, and I am going to turn this one over to Charlotte. It's in the Safe Routes to School program.
All right, so this slide is showing the education and encouragement piece. This is the type of project under Safe Routes to School where you'll be helping to inform younger people about the rules of the road with either a bicycle and pedestrian safety education project or some other education or encouragement type. These are two examples: the walking school bus. There's also bike trains and a variety of other things that could be included under this category. Next slide. So this is the contact information for Barb, myself, and Brian. And we're going to leave this up here as we go ahead and wrap up the questions and answers for our webinar. I have a few questions here. There's a question about the NACTO bike guide and how much emphasis we put on that guide. I would say to this person asking the question that the NACTO bike guide is one of several guidance resource documents we provide and encourage people to consider. If you're providing a project and it is in the NACDO guide, then that particular treatment is definitely one that we will take seriously. The next question is about bulb out treatment, and I'm going to give this question to you, Brian. It is bulb outs often take bike lane space and make it harder for cyclists. Is this a good idea? So did you want to respond to that and how bulb outs can be designed for bicyclists?
Sure. I had a slide up there showing, why don't I just see if I can get back to it here, protected bike lanes. And I see protected bike lanes as a way to try to get the best of both worlds. So that bicyclist, where am I? I'm almost there, I think. There we go. So the bicyclist is able to continue through, and the pedestrian has the advantage of the bulb out protection piece there. So that is one way to deal with it. Other than that, you have to consider carefully how that bike lane ends at the intersection and what you want to do. A bike box is a way to deal with ending at the intersection as well. But that still may be challenging with the curb extension.
Thank you. The next question is about the Safe Routes to School applications, and it has to do with the student travel tallies and the issue that students are not at this time attending schools. That is not information that you need to collect for a grant application for Safe Routes to School in this biennium. We chose to look at the density of the population near the school or at the project location, at the project location, rather than the actual count of children who are walking and biking. So hopefully that answers your question well enough. The next question is about these PowerPoint slides that we have, and they are going to be saved and posted online on the Call for Projects page, which I shared with you earlier. So they will be available for you to download from that site. The next question is about getting the project in the STIP, and thank you for pointing that out to me, Liz. That was a misstep on my part. You do need to get these projects into the State Transportation Improvement Program, and you will need to put a date in the application form about when that will happen. The next question, when will folks know they are being selected? And so the award letters are intended to go out in late spring of 2021 after we hear from the legislature about the transportation budget, and the governor has an opportunity to sign the budget. Usually the award letters will go out in June. The next question is about slide 43, and the person asking the question indicates this is not a bulb out slide. So thanks, Brian, for moving to that slide. I'm not sure what image they have in mind there. Oh, did you want to respond to that question? It's a follow-up to the earlier one.
Yeah, sure. So this is not a bulb out slide. This is a protected intersection, but they essentially create a bulb out. So imagine that the bike lanes were not there. You would basically have curb extensions and just wide sidewalks. So the pedestrian who's standing, if you look at the southeast quadrant of this intersection, there's a very light gray pedestrian standing there by the yellow bar. That person is protected from the motor vehicle. The motorist there at the stop bar can easily see that pedestrian, and the pedestrian has a very short crossing distance. So they effectively have a curb extension at their disposal.
Brian, I think perhaps if you go to slide 49.
Okay. I'm trying to get this out of the way, sorry.
And that may be the example that the individual is thinking of.
Right, so there, yes, so this is specifically a curb extension or bulb out, whereas the protected intersection offers the benefits of a curb extension while also benefiting crossing bicyclists. Am I answering the question correctly? I'm not sure because I don't see it in front of me.
I think too on this image, the two children on the sidewalk, you can see the bike lane adjacent to them and the curb extension, and that a part of the space is left in the bike lane to allow for the bicyclist to go through and not have to enter the travel lane for this particular intersection. That could be a better image, I agree. There are other ways to go about doing that, but that's one example.
Yeah, I was not cluing in on looking at the photo at all. Yeah, so yeah, that's not ideal, that it doesn't give you know, a full bike lane space through at that point. And so sometimes they have a bend in and bend out situation. And really the bend in and bend out are starting to get into features of protected intersections.
So the next question is, would adding a turn lane with FYI phasing be considered at a signalized location where the problem is permitted only phasing from a single lane conflicting with heavy school per volume? Okay, there's a follow-up to that question. Should be pedestrian volumes, not per volumes. Thank you. So in heavy pedestrian volumes, that phasing question, is that for a leading pedestrian interval phase? I'm going to need this person to rewrite their question because I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the FYA phasing. While you're doing that, I'm going on to the next question we have here. And this is, will a single application with multiple smaller projects score better than individual smaller applications? Would a proponent be awarded partial projects? We don't have a mechanism to award partial projects. What you submit as a project becomes a whole thing that moves forward through the process to the end. Your question about whether it would score better is hard to answer. I think it depends on the types of projects that you're putting together and how that all works. So maybe this is a question that needs a specific location and an answer at another time where it's just the two of us. So I encourage you to connect with me on this one individually. The next question is about safe routes to school. If a school opens in the fall of 2019, will data be available for WSDOT to use via OSPI? If not, should applicant email WSDOT specific data? If there is not any data available on the OSPI report card page, we'll use the demographic information from census data. You don't need to send additional information. The next question, are planning opportunities covered by either program? if a city needed traffic counts or safety analysis to create a city safety plan, could they apply for the traffic count services or crash analysis? The planning grant is only available through the Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Program, and it must result in a project that could be applied for or could be funded and construct at a previous time. A general city safety plan is not an eligible expense under that category. The next is a comment that the bicyclist on this slide that you're showing, Brian, on slide 49, is on the sidewalk. They're not supposed to be there. The bike lane gets cut off. We have this exact problem in my town of Bainbridge. Did you want to speak more to that, or do we have it? I think perhaps I'll ask the person who presented this question to do follow-up if they need more information.
Yes, and I'm not familiar if this is an anacortes, whether that person is allowed to be on the sidewalk. In many jurisdictions, you are allowed to ride on the sidewalk, and even with the presence of a bike lane, they might be encouraged to do so. There is no bike lane in the direction of travel that bicyclist is going. So, yeah, that's probably why they're on that sidewalk. But it may be perfectly legal to do so there.
The next question is, if award letters aren't sent out until spring of 2021, and projects have to start before December 31, 2021, that doesn't allow time for the cities to get the project funded in their annual budgets. Will cities be notified later in 2020 that they will be recommended for funding so they can incorporate the project into their 2021 budget? The report with the prioritized project list that is sent to the governor and the legislature is posted on our webpage, on the Safe Routes to School and Pedestrian Bicycle Funding webpage. I encourage you to look at that. That is posted in December, and that will give you some idea of where your project rests in association with the other projects that are being considered for funding.
Charlotte, will it still be December? Is that the target, given the fact that this grant has been moved out from its original target of January?
Yes, that's written in law, so that's what we're going to do. I understand, but that's what we'll be doing. We'll put it in. We'll post it in December. The next question, or the next clarification, is about that previous question. FYA means flashing yellow arrow, could be changed to protected only by time of day. Thank you for following up on that last question. So going back to the original question, would the project fund a turn lane where there would be a flashing yellow arrow phasing to consider a single lane conflicting with heavy school volume? It would definitely consider that as an option. We would look to the research to determine if that actually has an impact on reducing fatal or serious injuries or crashes in general for people who are walking and biking. We typically turn to recent research articles from NCRP or more so as well to the clearinghouse, the Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse, and there's a link to that on our webpage. So if you wanted to check that out and see how that particular type of treatment affects the safety of people walking and biking. That's what we'll be doing too when we look at your projects. We'll be using that tool. The next question is, why is design only not available for Safe Routes to School projects? What's the rationale? The rationale there is that the Safe Routes to School program is both federal and state related funds. The federal funds have very tight restrictions on how the money can be spent, and that does not allow for a design-only project. We try to have details related to that project be consistent for federal or state funds and the requirements that go along with those, because there's no guarantee what bucket of funding your project might come from if you get a Safe Routes to School award. So it needs to meet the requirements up front. The next question, can you repeat when a construction project must be started by for this grant round? And if you have a construction project or any project, we're looking for those to be started in the first year of the biennium, and preferably the first 6 months. And if you need additional time, I think those of you who have worked with local programs before understand how we're flexible, and we work. I shouldn't say we. I'm not with local programs anymore, but they work hard to make sure these projects are deliverable and adjust and give some flexibility to local agencies that might need that. The next question is a statement, so I'm going to go ahead and to the next one, which is the remainder of this webinar call questions and answer, or is there additional staff instructions still to come? The answer is that it is. We are now in the question and answer phase, and you have actually asked the last question that I have on my list. So unless we have additional questions, we're going to wrap up here. I did get one more question come in. Will Washington State Department of Transportation support the pop-up demonstration on state routes if the city desires it? And this will be something that we'll be doing in combination with the region staff who help to manage it. If the city is over 27,500, then that's a little different than if it's a smaller city. But as we have not done these projects around the state with any great number, I'll have to say that would probably be a case-by-case process. And I encourage you to contact your region DOT staff person and check in with them regarding these particular types of treatment. Right. So thank you again, everyone, for these questions and for participating and hanging in with us for the webinar. In addition to providing the slides and the recorded version of the webinar, we'll be taking the questions that you've provided here, making sure that answers are included, and save that spreadsheet as an attachment to the to include on our web page. And that way, those places where a question got stumbled over, we'll be able to answer more gracefully, hopefully. So again, thank you very much for your participation, and contact us as you have questions, and look forward to seeing your application.